This is Michael Barrier. I'm the author of a book called Hollywood Cartoons, American Animation in its Golden Age, and I'll be talking to you about Duck Amuck, this wonderful cartoon directed by Chuck Jones and starring Daffy Duck. Really starring only Daffy Duck, although there is another famous Warner Brothers character who appears in a cameo role at the very end. That character, not to give away too much, is Bugs Bunny, and this cartoon almost didn't get made, or at least it didn't get made the way it should have been made, because there was resistance within the studio to using Bugs Bunny in such a limited role. Chuck Jones, the director of the cartoon, explained to me just what the problem was when I spoke with him about this cartoon some years ago.
They're trying to fight with him. No, he said, "There's a big star, for Christ's sake. You're not using a little place like that." Sure.
I mean, at what stage when you're doing storyboards?
Well, no, we didn't know what the answer was, so we almost got there. I didn't know who was fighting.
Oh, I see.
He was fighting with me. And I called that when it happened on the drawing board. I'd call Mike in. I just started out. He had the opening and a few gags, and then I started putting it together, and I'd call him in because, it really began to happen on the board. So we didn't really know what the end was going to be. And finally, I don't remember, one of us came over and it had to be Bugs. It couldn't be anyone else. So we did that, and then Johnny said, "You better check that with Silver." So we did, and then he fought us. And I think I actually put it in without his consent. We go laughing all the way.
I was sitting down and just thinking, what would happen if you ran out of background? That's what I felt about Daffy, If he runs out of background, what happens? So I called Mike and I said, I've got a frustration here. What are we going to do about it? So that picture just kept growing and growing, and we worked it out as we went along. We didn't know where we were going. And that's what's so much fun about it. You don't want a finished picture. The picture's going to end anyway. It's like flying in an airplane. The question isn't whether you're going to land. You're going to land all right. Then how do you land safely? That's the whole point, isn't it? I never worry about a picture ending. Because in there, I felt, all the way through, I felt that what was actually happening was that I was in conflict with Daffy. I was the one, not Bugs. I was the one. And then I got to the ending, I thought, I can't do that. What am I going to do? Fortunately, and this couldn't have happened otherwise, I'd already made 2 or 3 of those Daffy Duck Bugs Bunny pictures in which they were in conflict with one another. I never would have put Bugs at the end because he had no conflict with Daffy up to that time. So then it became apparent when I got down there was only one thing in the stable we could use. We couldn't use Foghorn, and nobody else had that war with him, and Elmer wouldn't be strong enough to have done that. So Bugs had to be the one. Ain't I a stinker, he says.
And I've never been so humiliated in all my life.
This cartoon is really a cartoon about struggle, about Daffy's struggle with an unseen antagonist on the other side of the screen. And the struggle within the cartoon was mirrored to some extent in the making of it, not just in Chuck Jones's conflict with Edward Seltzer, but also during an unusual conflict with one of Chuck Jones's animators during the making of the cartoon.
Hey!
They wanted to make cartoons that were very high quality, and of course they did. One of the economies that was forced on the cartoon makers, though, was the need to limit what are called pencil tests. A pencil test is made when an animator has done the pencil drawings for a scene. Of course, what's involved in animation is making individual drawings for typically every couple of frames of film, each drawing differing slightly from the one before it. The standard practice in animation studios in the 40s and 50s was to shoot pencil tests of these pencil drawings. What that involved was taking the pencil drawings, shooting them as if they were finished animation, and then projecting them as on the not even developing the film, but projecting it as a negative. This gave the animator and the director the opportunity to review the film and review the animation and decide if there were any changes necessary. Changes, of course, because Warner Brothers was a very economy-minded studio, were typically quite few.
Hey! Come here! Come here! Give me a close-up! A close-up! This is a close-up? A close-up, yes!
The very unusual situation arose in connection with this cartoon in regard to the animation of Daffy Duck by Ben Washam. Ben Washam was one of Chuck Jones's 2 or 3 most important animators, a man who was particularly highly regarded for his ability to do what's called personality animation, that is, animation that brings out the personality of the character in a way that through relatively refined animation, I guess you'd say, like what we're seeing on the screen right now as the screen drops on Daffy's head, as opposed to, say, an action animator whose work is not as dependent on individual characters' personality. This cartoon, as I've noticed by now, has quite a lot of dialogue, but the problem in this case was that typically the pencil tests were not shown with recorded dialogue run with the pencil animation, but instead were just shown silent, and that led to a significant argument between Chuck Jones and Ben Washam. We'll hear Ben Washam's account of that argument now.
I had, at one time, a terrible row with Chuck. I thought I was going to pack my bags about that time. I had a long, long scene of Daffy just talking. Oh, it was 80 feet or some such thing. And it was a long, long lot of dialogue. It was a strange kind of talk he was going through. And so I timed it with very positive hesitates, sometimes holds, so that when you saw it without the dialogue, it didn't give an image of a guy, moving. And he declared that it didn't work and had to be done over. And I thought, do over 80 feet? Well, that's impossible. So I said, let's run it with sound. And I had a big argument about that. He said, I can tell, I don't need to see it with sound. Well, let's run it with sound anyway. And I argue. All the rest of the guys are standing there, see how it's going to come out. So finally he agreed. And we had to go clear across that lot over there to where this editor was and have him put it on the moviola. And we marched over there in just stony silence. And so he walked in, he sat down, and he looked at it. Well, with the dialogue and the hesitates in the dialogue, they fit the animation, and so it worked. So he got up and he said, that works. No more, no less, and we walked out. And as we're walking back across the lot to our studio, he said, don't think because you were right once that you will always be right. And that was the end of that. Never said another word, nor did I. That was the only time I ever had a test shot with dialogue. That had to come as a result of a terrible argument.
This cartoon is justly regarded as one of the very finest Warner Brothers cartoons.